So first of all, welcome to everybody. Happy to have you with us. It's a lovely Monday and it's time to talk about what's going on in the markets. We have certainly seen some big things happening, right? We've seen some real big, wild and crazy things happening. I'm sure you guys have been watching. Has everybody been seeing, all the movement and all the volatility that we've had? Seems like currencies have been kind of steady lately. The stock market's been pretty steady and everything's just kind of been really steady. And then we started to see a lot of volatility kind of the last half of last week. And so that was kind of wild. How did that treat everybody? Did you guys make some money on some of the movements that we saw kind of Thursday, Friday? And even, today was okay. We had a little bit of movement today, but, kind of a snap back from the recovery. Now, a couple of things happened, right? One of the things that we always like to kind of talk about and look at is the fact that we see end of month movement, right? We call it the end of month fix, the movement, all of that. And so we saw that, keep in mind today's March 1st, and we saw the end of the month movement just going bananas, as it sometimes does. So we saw that happen. And that's not uncommon, right? We saw some things, the dollar index made a pretty good little movement here. We saw things like Aussie dollar, make a pretty good movement. This is a weekly chart, right? The Australian dollar, had a pretty aggressive sell-off. This is Thursday, Friday, started making that big movement there. And so, we saw these big movements. They happen at the end of the month. It's not totally out of the norm. It does happen. But we're starting to kind of see this big picture thing lining up here where some of the currencies are making, they're making these wild and crazy moves. Let's get my text back up there. So we see currencies making these wild and crazy moves, right? So end of month fix. This is stocks and currencies, right? Does anybody here trade? Do we have any stock options traders? Or are you guys purely currency traders? Give me the scoop. By the way, little commercial here. This is healthy soda. If there's such a thing, I don't know if there is. So everyone's kind of in the forex arena. So I want to point out a couple of things that happened in stocks as well, because we have to understand that this is a big picture here, right? So end of month movements happen in stocks and they happen in currencies, right? Where we just get this, kind of unexpected sell-off where we say, that was a little bit ugly. And so we saw that happen. But what does it mean for currencies and stocks, right? What does this mean? What significance? What does this mean for forex and stocks? We have this big end of month sell-off. What's everybody thinking here? Do you guys think that we're going to see, are we going to see a big dollar rally? Are we going to see a big stock market sell-off? What are we going to see here? And that's the big question, right? So one thing that I'm looking at very, very closely here is this guy, which is, I'm watching the dollar index and I'm saying, okay, this thing's starting to work its way up. I love to use pivot points, and I think pivot points are so effective. We've had this big descending channel on the dollar index for some time now, and it kind of looks a little bit like this, right? And this takes us all the way back to kind of summer of last year. We've had this big descending channel. Is the dollar index ready to break out and make its movement, ready to make kind of a push there? That's the big question. So what I want everybody to start looking at, if you're just a forex trader, if you're just a currency trader, you have got to start correlating all the markets together. So here we have the dollar index. What does the dollar index mean? It means that, all of our dollar pairs that we're looking at, so much is tied to the dollar index. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this, right? So, what all this end of month sell-off means for stocks and forex is important. But remember, USD strength, weakness, it's tied to everything, right? This is tied to everything, because what happens is if we get a big rally in the dollar, if we see the dollar starting to run up, because it's been pretty overextended, right? This is kind of one of my strategies that I love, where I say, how long has something been away from the moving average. And the longer it goes, the more likely it is to snap back and make a run towards that moving average. And on this daily chart here, we see that the dollar index has been away from the moving average for a long time, right? So if the USD starts to show a lot of strength, if we start to see the dollar index running up and starting to move towards some of these moving averages and towards some of these consolidation zones like this right here, right? Like somewhere in kind of that area. If we start seeing it kind of getting back into that, 9,300, right in that general vicinity, what's that going to mean for, for stocks? What's that going to mean for everything, right? You guys, I'm assuming, are familiar with and look at the VIX. The VIX is maybe one of the most important dollar indicators that we can look at. And the VIX is, remember, this is our volatility index, and this tells us if the VIX is high, then we typically have a strong dollar, right? So this is a chart I want everybody to start looking at. Start looking at the VIX, because this is going to be really tied into what we see happening on the US dollar. Now, the VIX is not a trending chart. It doesn't, it reacts a little bit to highs and lows and support and resistance levels, but the VIX and the dollar index and the stock market and bonds are all like this. And until we understand kind of that relationship, we're going to be blindsided by some trades over and over again, right? And so when I look at the VIX, the volatility index, when this goes up, the stock market goes down, right? They call this the fear index. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's a fear index, right? When there's fear in the market, everybody pours into the dollar, kind of the safe haven currency and so on. And so when we have that fear, the VIX will go up and the stock market will go down. The VIX goes up, the US dollar goes up, right? And so we had this little VIX spike, but the dollar didn't really, the dollar spiked up a little bit and the VIX pulled back and the dollar's pulled back a little bit. They're following each other, they're doing pretty well. So what we're trying to identify is the VIX, hopped up and it's just right back to these lows. And then when we look at like the stock market in general, right? Here's the S&P. This is an ETF that follows the S&P. So I look at this over here and I say, okay, this is, the stock market's had a pretty big run, right? This is coronavirus sell-off, and the stock market's just been going up and up and up and up. But it's also getting overextended. So just like we looked at the dollar index and we said, okay, the dollar index has gone a long time without touching our moving averages, and there's some pretty good space in there without touching the 200 moving average. And so, remember, these guys will run opposite. If we see dollar strength, we're going to see stock market weakness, right? Is everybody familiar with this? Have you guys all kind of incorporated this into your trading in the past, or is this the first time some of you are hearing this? US dollar strength, most of the time, in most cases, means stock market weakness, right? Because this is, so important, right? US dollar strength and VIX strength is stock market weakness, right? So we have to kind of know about this stuff, because then we can really start to kind of understand what's going on. The stock market took a dip Thursday, Friday. The dollar index spiked up Thursday, Friday. The stock market is starting to climb again today, and the dollar is showing weakness, right? It's not really, it's not showing a ton of weakness, but it's certainly not continuing to climb. It's just getting flat again. And we've seen the dollar just flat for, really since about December, right? So for a couple of months, the dollar's been flat, and the stock market's been a little tiny bit on the flat side too, right? I mean, since this kind of takes us back into early January, a little dip, little run up, but really a lot of consolidation here. So we've seen these two things kind of consolidating, and we see the VIX just kind of staying pretty weak. So when we start to correlate these things, if the VIX goes up, then we should see the stock market start running towards these moving averages. And we should see the dollar index starting to run up towards these moving averages and some of these bigger resistance levels. And we can start to put together some pretty good trades. Now, what else do we have to kind of confirm this? We can start looking at other dollar pairs, right? You can say, okay, just like we brought up the Australian dollar, and we say, okay, the Australian dollar, US dollar is showing us, this kind of situation where we say, okay, that's a big bearish weekly candle. That's last week's candle on the Aussie dollar. Now, that's a big bearish candle, big reversal candle. And when we look at that and we say, where is that happening? Well, that's happening at 2015 levels, 2015, 16, 17, 18 levels, and we're turning around right there again. The Australian dollar is starting to sputter out. Now, I wouldn't say that this is full reversal territory, and it's going to take kind of the dominoes falling into place, right, for this Australian dollar to start selling off and specifically getting kind of below the low of this reversal candle that we're watching so closely. You got to get below that low, and that low right now is, we'll call 7,700, right? 7,700 on the Aussie dollar. So we got to get the Aussie dollar below 7,700, but for that to really have some legs and to have some meaning, the stock market needs to get weak again. And we need to see VIX up a little. And we need to see the dollar index showing that strength and making that run towards some of those upper targets that I feel pretty confident are going to get hit. So it's going to be like a domino effect. We're putting together these kinds of things. We're saying we have stock market, we have the volatility index, we have the dollar index, and we can start to overlay that onto certain things like the Aussie dollar, the euro dollar, the pound dollar, you know, a lot of these things, right? If we look at some of these other charts here, I think we have some pretty interesting charts to look at. Look at the pound dollar's weekly chart, right? That's huge. That's a big shooting star right there. And you can see that, you know, where did that happen? At these 2018 levels, right back here, right? So it happened right over there. I think the pound dollar's breaking out. I think the pound dollar's got a long way to go up. But maybe the pound dollar's got to come down a little bit as that dollar index strengthens a little bit, as the stock market weakens and corrects a little bit, as the VIX goes up a little bit, right? So it's going to be all about seeing those other signals so that we can then go over to things like the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, the pound dollar, and we can start to say, what's going on here? Look at the New Zealand dollar, big shooting star. Where did that happen, right? Where did this big shooting star happen on New Zealand dollar? Let's go and look. It happened right through here, right? So that big movement, that big turning point, that big long wick happened through all this resistance over here, which again takes us back to 2015, 16, 17, you know, big levels, right? Long term, I would expect all these guys to make a big break up here and have a big, nice movement. But in the meantime, when we're starting to see some big bearish candles on weekly charts, and we're starting to see that the stock market has this long kind of run of, you know, it's been a good long time since it's touched the moving averages and been back to that area. It's been almost we're creeping up on, you know, 9-10 months, right? We're starting to get kind of in that area. So I'm looking here and we're saying, okay, these are some of the big picture items that we want to see. These are some of the big things that we want to see happen that we have to pay very, very close attention to. So what I want you guys to make sure that you take away from this is USD strength and weakness is tied to everything, right? If you know, and on that note, we'll say stocks up, USD down. And that's also going to be VIX down. But vice versa, if stocks are down, USD should be up. And VIX should be up, right? And so what does that give us? That gives us fantastic opportunities to short Aussie dollar, US dollar, New Zealand dollar, US dollar, pound dollar, US dollar, euro, right? Gives us opportunities to make these kinds of trades. So these are just a couple of things I want you guys to look at and think about when you're doing your chart analysis. Is part of it is the technical analysis side of things, but when you can overlay that technical analysis onto multiple charts, onto the dollar index and the stock market and the VIX, and then we can start to extrapolate that onto Aussie dollar, euro dollar, pound dollar, New Zealand dollar, and so on, then this gets super, super important, A, to kind of understand what's going on, and B, can give us some really good high probability trades. We have a lot of currencies that are trading around major resistance levels, super important. And if we can keep an eye on the stock market and what's happening over there, that's going to give us a really important signal for starting to jump onto some of those guys. So if that is something that sounds interesting to you, and we'll give you a little bit more in the way of tools for understanding and identifying what might be coming in the stocks in the future, then by all means, have a look at it, use it for your own. I'm going to be sending out more videos and details about this. We're going to talk about this in webinars, in future webinars, and I think that's going to be super important. If you're interested in learning more about this and you want to find out about trade groups that I run where we focus on this stuff every single day. That's why today was such a busy day, because I trade stocks and stocks were all over the place, and I trade options and they were all over the place, and I trade currencies and they were all over the place. And it was just a crazy day because I was looking at all of these things and making trades on all of these things. The stock market's going really awesome right now. The currency market's got a lot of great opportunities. And so we want to be, my goal is for everybody to be well versed. I think it's to our disadvantage. A lot of stock and options traders know nothing about the currency market, and they don't know how to correlate the two. And a lot of currency traders know nothing about the stock market and don't know how to correlate the two. And so when we learn how to do that, this gives us an incredible edge on finding the best, most high probability currency trades and setups. So I believe that the days are gone of being a Forex trader or a stock trader. The days are here of you have to know how to trade everything. And you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you've got to understand how these guys work together. So what do you guys think? Questions, comments, thoughts? How does everybody feel about that? What does everyone think about those details? Does that make sense, first of all? Is everyone following the discussion, the connecting the dots? What do you guys think? Make sense? Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Good. Excellent. Excelente. Okay, so I'm going to send out this recording. You guys can have a look at it. But I want to make sure that everyone kind of understands what it is we're trying to do here. We've got to have a broad understanding so that we can have a really focused approach on whatever it is that we're trading. So that's super important. I hope that's helpful. We'll see you guys again soon. But I wanted to share that with you. That's the thing that I have been so heavily focused on, certainly always, but even more so the last several weeks, as we've seen this kind of dollar index movement trying to happen and the stock market movement trying to happen. This is going to be so important, and we need to make sure that we're really up to speed with this. So hopefully that's helpful. Thanks a bunch, everybody, for watching. Good luck, happy trading, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care, guys. Thanks, everybody.